Here we go. Okay, so welcome everyone. I have done this before. Obviously, it was a bit easier last time, maybe. So let's crack on. So with your travel info being released this last week and shared to you, there have been a good number of questions come in and submitted to the team here, and we'll try and answer the majority of those this evening. Obviously, the more general ones, and hopefully we'll cover everything and the majority of your questions and concerns. Anything more specific to obviously your personal travel that we don't cover this evening, then certainly ask a question. Either ask it on the call this evening or via the travel@ukcontingent.co.uk email address, and we prefer you go there first. But if it's related to the post Jamboree tours, then it'll be scouts@travelplaces. But the email addresses are displayed on the last slide for you, just for reference. Okay. So with that in mind, if you miss something that we say, and we'll get through a lot of information this evening, so if you miss something we say, we're recording the call, my issues with the slides as well, and that'll be available through the IST zone in the What Have I Missed section with all the other information that we've sent out, obviously, to you guys along the journey that we've gone. Okay, so who's speaking? Myself, Mark Turner. We'll have Andy Lewis. He's our CMT travel man. Matt Longdon is assisting him. Chris Burry is, if you're aware of him on Facebook, he's recently travelled a fair bit of the globe, so some tips and tricks there. And with some representatives from travel places, the travel partners for this Jamboree journey that we're going on. So what will we cover? All the answers to your questions, hopefully. Any uncertainties you might have about the travel dates. Obviously, information came out previously, and then you'll have received your dates in this last week, and there may be a few questions you have around that, and hopefully we'll answer those for you this evening. And if not, as I say, drop us a line. That's not a problem. Our airport recommendations. How to move about if you're traveling independently of the contingent as well. There may be some tips and tricks in there for you to pick up as well that might be useful for you. Top tips for traveling alone. Hopefully you'll be able to buddy up with other IST members, but obviously if you're traveling alone, some top tips for doing that. And then a step-by-step guide for getting to the Jamboree and back safely. So, as I've already said, if you have a question, feel free to submit it. That's available through the GoToWebinar app. We'll try and answer as many of those as we can on the call. What I would say is if you try and hold those back and then just listen to the call as it goes through and just make sure we don't already answer it. That'll just help the guys in the back who are filtering those questions. It'll just help them obviously filter out the ones that we know we're answering or we already have an answer for. And then, as I say, specific ones, drop those in either through the chat there or via the email, and certainly we'll pick them up. And all those will be recorded and saved so we can get back to you. So that's not going to be an issue. And we'll try and answer as many of those questions that you submit tonight, as I've already said, and pick up any that we haven't thought of and that maybe haven't been submitted already, and we'll pick those up at the end. So we're going to go over to Andy Lewis now, who's going to tell you all about your travel itinerary.
Good evening, guys and girls. So you now have already received, if you're on option A and B, you've already received your dates of travel and your flight numbers, etc. And I know that's probably generated a few questions for some of you. We're going to cover those as we go through tonight. Options C and D, who are on their own travel, obviously it's down to you to sort that out, but you will be getting additional information regarding the arrival points into the Jamboree site, the official input sites, so that you can make sure that you're lining up with those in terms of your arrival and arrival times. A lot of the information that's on the Jamboree website itself is probably up to date, but one bit of information that we found out only in the last 7 days is that the arrival centre, which looked as if it was going to be closing at 9 o'clock in the evenings, is now open 24/7. So there's no issue for you arriving there in the middle of the night if you so desire to, and that's the way your travel plan works out. Okay. Thanks, whoever did that. Right, travel dates. The high ropes team know that they are travelling a day earlier than everybody else to get them there to get involved with their training on site on the high ropes. On the 17th, they all depart. On the 18th, the remaining members of option A and B IST depart for the Jamboree site. The flights you've all been notified of. At all of the airports that you arrive, there will be members of the either travel places and or CST there to make sure that you are linked up with your coaches. But at one airport in particular, you'll be met by our travel partner in the States, and that's a company called TMS, who will also guide you to the coaches. Whilst I mentioned TMS, you will see them dotted around on both the official Jamboree site, but also in the messages and communications that you get from us. TMS is a very, very experienced coach management company and are managing the coaches for the official Jamboree this year. They're managing all of the coaches for us this year, and they've had several Jamborees, national Jamborees, that they've managed in and out of the summit. There is nothing that these guys don't know about making sure your coach travel to and from wherever you arrive into the summit is going to be organised very efficiently and very smoothly. We've been working with them now for over 12 months in making sure that all these arrangements are in place. So there really is nothing for you to worry about in terms of what happens when you drop off the flight at the other end and how you're going to get to the summit. Some of you are arriving quite late into Washington, for example, and I know that you've been asking questions about, what time you're actually going to arrive at the summit site. Unfortunately, you will be arriving in the middle of the night or probably very early in the following morning. But travel arrangements have been made. The reception area will be open to receive you there, and you will be able to go straight to your tent, which will already be erected for you. So you've not got to start pitching tents. Some of you perhaps remember Japan and the same sort of problems. It won't be the same there. You'll be taken straight to an already set up tent. On the 3rd of August, option A and D travel back out to Washington for the post event, and option B will be flying home. Option C, it's down to you on what you're doing. You'll be making your arrangements to come out of the using the TMS coach transport to the official entry points and onwards to your travel, which you will have already arranged yourselves. On the 5th of August, the IST depart for additional optional tours or their personal travel to get back home. There have already been a few questions from a lot of people that are based in the north of England that are unfortunately having to fly out of Heathrow. Let me just put that straight for the time being. Those are the people that are going on the Cancun tour. And if you look back at your original paperwork on the Cancun tour before you booked it, it said quite clearly that flight, those people on that flight would depart from Heathrow and return to Heathrow. So that was notified to you in the paperwork before the flight. Unfortunately, those flights that are going on those tours don't offer internal connecting flights from Manchester, so you are going to have to make your own way to Heathrow under your own steam. Okay, next slide, please. So for those that are making your own travel, option C and D points of entry, those are the 3 points: Charlotte Douglas International Airport, Charleston Yeager Regional Airport, and the Amtrak Print Station. There will be transport provided by the Jamboree team from there into the Jamboree site, and there is a link there that you probably already have seen. So I apologize if I'm telling you stuff that you already know, but that's the link that you need to go on to understand how to use those entry points for you if you're using your own travel in and out of the Jamboree. But again, if having looked at that and you've still got questions, of course, we're here to try and help with those. So, feed the questions in using the email addresses that have been used to us, but not to Travel Places. Okay, so it's not Travel Places' responsibility to sort you guys out. It's ours. Next slide, please. So you'll have seen the request forms for options C and D. If you've not, you need to go to the link that's there and fill in that TMS form. For options A and B, as I said earlier, we will inform you about, we've already informed the organisers of your travel requirements. You don't have to do anything. As I said earlier, when you get off the flight at the other end and you've cleared customs and got your bags, there will be people there, either CST and or Travel Places staff, or in one case, TMS staff, who will be holding big boards up saying, walk this way, and they will get you onto your coaches and make sure that you get straight to the summit. Okay, next slide, please. Right, before you go, just think about your hold baggage. There are a variety of weights across the airlines, and you have to consider that you might be on an internal flight if you're doing a tour or whatever. The advice is that you stick to 20 kilograms for your main baggage, so that you won't break any rules if you stick within the 20 kilos. Make sure that you check which items can't go in the hold baggage. Each of the airlines have got different lists. You'll get that information when you get your tickets, but do make sure you're responsible for making sure that your bag can actually go on the aircraft. You will actually get padlocks provided for your big bags as part of the kit issue later on. As it says there, you need to know what's in your bag. You're completely responsible for that. Pack it yourself, and then when you get to the check-in desk, those of you that travel regularly will have been through this. There'll be some out there listening that have never done this sort of thing before. Make sure you pack it yourself. When you get to the desk, they will ask you if you've packed it yourself, and you need to be able to say honestly yes, and you know what's in it, and none of the forbidden items are actually in your bag. Okay. Next slide, thank you. Hand baggage, again, each of the airlines have different ways of deciding what size hand baggage is allowed. Make sure you check with the airline that you're going on what their rules are, and sometimes it's size, sometimes it's size and weight. Just make sure that you've got that sorted out. In that carry-on bag, no individual bottle of liquid of any sort over 100 mils. Right, so that's quite small bottles of whatever it may be, shampoo or whatever. You can buy those at any good chemist before you fly out there. Tesco's do them, I know. Get 2 or 3 of those for your stuff that you want during your travel, and put those inside a sealable plastic bag, so that they can actually see what's in the bag without having to open it up as you go through the security check. Make sure again that you know what prohibited items there are for your hand baggage. Often, obviously, let's not take any big knives on the flight in the handbags, but there's a whole list of things that you can't take in your hand baggage. Medication, again, there is advice on various websites about things like EpiPens and those sort of things. Check that up before you go. If you're using one of those, make sure that you know what the rules are in terms of what you can and can't carry on the flight. And from the time that you leave the door and get into your transport to the airport and through the airport itself, never leave that hand baggage unattended. That's the time when things go wrong. If you leave it unattended anywhere, it's liable to have something either put in it or taken away and disposed of. So please, keep them on your backs and do not lose them whilst you're in the airport. Otherwise, you're risking missing your flight as well. Arrival at the airport, most of the airlines suggest 3 hours. We're suggesting 3.5 hours because we know that there's going to be lots and lots of you going through some of these terminals at the same time, and 3.5 hours will leave you that little bit of comfort to make sure that you can get through the airport with plenty of time to sit in the departure lounge comfortably before your flight takes off. Make sure you've got your documents to hand, in the top of your carry-on bag or in a button-down pocket. But keep all your documents together in a plastic see-through folder so that you know where they are and you can get at them easily. 3.5 hours should cover you for any delays, but there might be delays even beyond that once you get into the departures, or if you're on a connecting flight, there might be departures there. So make sure that you've got stuff in your carry-on bag that's going to see you through that. So whatever snacks or that you need to take with you, make sure that you've got those there. If you've got regular medication that you've got to take when you're on a long haul flight, obviously make sure you've got a decent supply of that there as well. Again, for those of you that are seasoned travellers, this is all fairly straightforward, but there are some people out there that have not done this before, so this is for their benefit. And last bit of advice, do make sure before you leave home that you know which terminal you're going to at each airport. It is very easy to choose the wrong terminal and then have a mad panic of how do you change terminals at the airport. At some airports that's easier than others. At Heathrow, if you're at the wrong terminal, you've got quite a journey to get to the right one if you're at the opposite end of the airfield. So do make sure that you're going into the correct terminal, both for departing the UK, and some of you will have terminals or airports at the other end that have got 2 terminals. We'll be making sure that you go to the right one there, but just for your own peace of mind, make sure that you've got that firmly fixed before you leave. Okay. So again, a bit obvious, but when you get to the airport, first thing you do, go to the screens and make sure that you're again in the right terminal. You can see your flight and you can see which check-in desk you're heading for, and then head for that check-in desk straight away. That's the first thing that you do. At the check-in, you'll get several security questions, as we've mentioned earlier. Who's packed the bags? What's in the bags? Do you know what's in there? And they'll check your own personal details against your passport. Make sure that you know what your return travel date is, so because they will probably ask you that. Not always, but they may do. Just make sure that you've got that there. So your paperwork in your plastic wallet will tell you all of that. Have that to hand. Make sure you've got a paper copy of your ESTA, because the ESTA status will be checked by the airline at the check-in desk. They can see it electronically, but they may well ask to have a look at your paper copy. And boarding passes for the USA are not issued in advance, so your boarding information or your boarding card will be printed when you're actually at the departure desk. You won't have that in your hand when you arrive at the airport. Okay. Obviously, if you're on A and B and travelling as part of the contingent, you must travel in uniform. We recommend that you take a change of clothing on the plane in your hand luggage so that you can change on the plane and make yourself comfortable for that long haul flight. But please do remember that we're all going to be on show. There's going to be lots of us travelling together. I'm sure you will make sure that we do ourselves proud in the way that we appear at the airport, and then change back into your uniform once you arrive in the US, so that you're traveling in uniform as you head towards the Jamboree site. It'll help everybody when you're getting off at the other end, because you know, the TMS and CST guys will be able to spot you readily if you're turning up with your bare knicker and uniform on. Okay. So I'm going to hand over to for Chris to give you some of his top tips if you're traveling alone or if you're first-time travelers. Chris. We're just having a little bit of a problem with Chris's sound, so whilst he tries to unpin that, Chris's slides here, this is based on Chris's experience, and I'm sure he'll buzz in and interrupt me as soon as he gets his sound working. So Chris is a very travelled individual, so you know, these are his hints and tips on how you make sure that you're safe, not just in the airport, but all the time that you're travelling around. Obviously, cash, you know, minimize that as much as you can. Don't carry loose cash around with you. You really won't need it. Most of the stuff that you're going to be doing, you'll be doing on cards. But also take cards with you for unexpected circumstances. So if you've got both a debit card and a credit card, take them both with you so that you make sure that you're covered for either way. Most UK cards are accepted in most outlets in the US. It's not quite the same for Canada, but not all of you will be traveling up there. So obviously minimalist, pack as light as you possibly can. It's less to carry, and obviously it's less to lose in both volume and importance to you. Packing cubes or little packing boxes are very useful within your bag.
Thank you, Andy. I think I'm connected. Yes, I just had a disconnection from the having to enter the code in, but it wouldn't let me enter the code. But no problem, we're all good to go. So as Andy said, I've been lucky enough to have to relatively regular travel, and I've heard you kind of covered up to packing cubes, but they really do compartmentalize your life. So I would recommend, if there's one thing I'd recommend to buy for packing, it absolutely would be packing cubes. So printing. If you print a copy of your itinerary, your insurance, your details, your ESTA, a copy of your passport, keep it with you at all time, just in case technology lets you down. And let people know where you are as you're traveling around as well. So when you've got to an airport, just let whoever you're in touch with know that you're at the airport. Share with a friend that when you're going on from a traveling point of view. Now, like just traveling around in the UK, just go with your instincts, but feel free to ask someone for help, because the majority of people are going to be quite happy to help you from a travel perspective. So if I head on to the next slide. Should head through to the next one. So the next piece would be kind of staying happy and overcoming boredom when traveling around, because you can have some lull periods, particularly if you're traveling on your own. So take selfies of your journey and share with friends how excited you are on this amazing Jamboree that you're going to be heading on. Chat to other members of the contingent and other IST members, but also members of the public are going to be kind of interested where you're going with you being in a uniform. at the moment. So absolutely would recommend consider chatting to people, meeting new people if you're traveling on your own, and jump on any opportunities that are presented to you. If you bump into some people from the contingent when you're in the waiting lounge as you go through. Now, also think about other ways you may want to keep yourself busy on long journeys. So there's going to be some long coach travels from whatever airport you're landing in. So there's only so much talking you can do after you've been on a plane with the same people for about 8 hours. So consider keeping yourself entertained with things on these coach journeys too. And keep a journal. Start explaining how you feel from a personal development point of view on your journey towards the next location. And we'll head on to the next slide. So what I wanted to do is just give you a step-by-step guide to airport travel, and some little tips that I kind of follow religiously when I go traveling on overseas. I particularly try and get myself through each part I'm going through. So if we start with before leaving home, before leaving the airport, you've got to think of a few things and make sure you're ready and prepared. So what I'd always advise is check the flight status of the airline prior to your flight, but delays can change. So even if it's saying that you're going to have a delay, it makes you prepare for the delay. So you might want to bring a bit of extra cash for some food, but flights can still leave on time, even if they've suggested there may be a delay online. So make sure you're on time for your flight regardless. About 3.5 hours prior to your flight, arrive at the airport. The sooner that you contact the airline if there's been a cancellation, the more likely you are to get on another flight as soon as possible. So for those of you that are organising your own travel, if your flight has been cancelled, don't panic. Just get in touch with the airline or whoever you've booked your flights with as soon as possible. If you are flying with the contingent, travel places will help deal with this if in the unlikely event that the flight has a cancellation. Now make sure that you've got your passport with you, you know your flight booking number, and some easy access to money and a phone, so you can get in touch with people or get yourself sorted with some extra food if anything doesn't go to plan throughout that journey. And make sure that you add at least 1 hour to your travel time to the airport. Particularly Heathrow, it can get particularly hectic around the summer times with all the families going on holiday. So you need to try and arrange at least 3.5 hours before, but when you're considering your journey to the airport, think about adding an extra hour to your typical travel time. Worst case scenario, you end up with a little bit more time in the lounge or in the shops prior to getting checked into your flight. So if you're parking at the airport, think about how you're traveling, how you're running through. If you're parking at the airport, do think, are you arriving at the same terminal that you're leaving from? Now, a taxi from Heathrow to Gatwick is a £70 mistake. You don't want to make more than twice, but speaking from personal experience. Now, remember, airports are massive and travel between terminals can be kilometres apart and miles apart in terms of difference. So you've arrived at the airport and you've got to that next stage. So on arrival at the airport, you need to make sure you're at the right terminal and head to the departures. Now, you will need to know who your flight is with, so check your flight number and the details as to which flight you'll be checking into, and follow the signs to this location. So if they say, for example, you're flying with British Airways, look at your flight where British Airways check-in is and head to that location. There should also be boards with some flights around that area. They'll say which zone you may want to go to, because British Airways has typically a large number of flights. Now, you may need to check into a self-check-in kiosk where you print your own tags and your boarding pass at this stage. Now, if you don't know what you're doing here, there are people that will be able to help you. So just flay your arms around a bit. Someone will come over to help you. Now, you do need to then check your bag in at the desk. So take your bag over to a location, but then at that point, you've got your boarding pass ready and you're all ready to go. Now, at that point, great, your bag has dropped through, and now just follow the signs to departures. Now, it does sound a bit weird that you've just arrived at the airport, but you don't go to arrivals because you're actually departing the airport. So you'll need your passport and your boarding pass at this point, so keep it handy so you're ready to go straight through to the security and stick your bag through at this point. Now, you're likely to go through a barrier for your boarding pass. So at this point, it's probably worthwhile saying goodbye to any loved ones that have been with you at the airport. Now, you're away for 3 weeks, not 3 years, so it's time to catch flights and not feelings, and we're ready to go to the security. So that leads us to our next slide. here's an example of the check-in desk where you take your bag. I'm sure you'll all be familiar with it. If not, in less than 100 days, you will be. So onto our security slide. So you'll want this to be as smooth as possible, as the frequent travelers that will be at their airport will be judging you from slowing them down when going through security, because they will be wanting to get to Wetherspoons very likely, and will be visiting that when they get through. So any makeup or fluids will need to be in a see-through bag and no larger than 100 milliliters. Now, these will be needed to come out of the bag, so make sure that you keep them nice and accessible. In addition to laptops and tablets, depending on the grade of security from the airport that you're at, but those of you who are flying from the UK, you will need to get your laptops and tablets out of the bag when you're going through security. Now, what I would advise is to pack an empty water bottle in your hand luggage. So if you're taking your UKC bottle in your hand luggage, keep it empty in the bag. Now, there are plenty of places where you can fill it up, but if you can't find one, just give it over to a restaurant and they'll be able to fill it up for you. Now, I typically advise when traveling to try and avoid belts that are difficult to take off, and shoes, because it's very likely they'll need to come off. So make it as easy as possible. You can slip those shoes off, take that belt off quickly so you can get straight through security. And then it just comes down to common sense. No knives, scissors, acids, firearms, explosives, and really avoid making any jokes at security as well. You can be banned from flying at that point if you do so, but also it's just, it's not very nice for people that maybe feel uncomfortable about traveling. So just avoid being unsensible, and remember you're representing the Scout Association. Now, you've made it to the departure of land for this point, but I would advise at this point, put your passport and boarding pass away somewhere safe, but accessible for ready when you get on the plane. So if we move on to our next slide. So it's ready and it's time to catch the plane. So you're at that next stage. You're in the departure lounge. So it's really important that just as you've got through security, that you keep all of your belongings close to you, get yourself packed away and ready as quickly as possible, because at this stage, people usually are a lot more vulnerable to theft, because you've just got your valuables out your bag, you've just got through security, you may have your shoes in your hand, your belt in your hand. You can misplay things at this point. So as you're a bit vulnerable at this stage, and if you think about it, it's a place where there's going to be a significant amount of cash because people are heading out on holiday. So just keep your wits about you at this stage. Now, once you've gone into the departure board or the departure lounge, the first thing you need to go and do is look at your departure board. See the latest information about your flight and the gates that you should be at that point. Now remember that gates usually close about 45 minutes from departure. We'd recommend that you aim to get to your gate at least an hour before your departure, ideally. But your gate may not be announced at the time, and it may be that your airport chooses not to do announcements. So absolutely keep an eye on that board the whole time, at least an hour before your flight. Look and check to know exactly which gate you're going to, because there can be a long walk between each gate. Now, all going well, you should have about an hour and a half to hit Wetherspoons for food. Those lucky of you going from Gatwick South may even get a cheeky Nando's in. Now, but in all seriousness, whilst in an airport, it may be 5 o'clock somewhere, remember you are representing scouting, and alcohol is dehydrating. And being on a plane, the air is a lot drier. So we would advise drinking hydrating drinks and staying hydrated all the time. In addition to that, staying hydrated is going to stop jet lag as well. Now, enjoy the time at the airport. Look for others in uniform, but don't assume that they're on the same flight as you, because keeping an eye on the boards all the time is really important. And the flight, as soon as they announce the gate is open, head straight over there. It can take up to 20 minutes in some airports to walk to the gate. And it may even be that you have to catch a monorail or something at that flight from wherever you're going. There will be plenty of signs, though, as you can see in the photos. As you're heading through, there's plenty of signs as you head through. Now, you've got to the gates, and now you've got to wait until your boarding call is announced. They may announce it in a variety of different ways, but it's a good time to put what you want while you're on the plane into a little side bag that you can keep with you. You may want chewing gum or a sucky sweet or strepsils, especially if you've had a cold in the last few weeks, as the air can be quite dry, and when you're going in the depressurized environment, your ears can pop, and it's really helpful to have a sweet to suck on at that stage. Now, make sure that you've got your boarding pass and passport to hand at this stage, because they're going to ask you for them when you try and get on the plane, but also you're very likely to be given a landing card when you're on the plane. So keep a pen to hand as well at this point. So you should now be ready to board and sat on the plane, ready to take off. So that leads us on to getting out at the other side, and step 5 of our journey. So enjoy the relatively short long haul flight. If you've been arranging your own flight, and you may be flying via Iceland to New York or another location with Iceland Air, remember that you may be on 2 short haul flights. So you may need to consider what you eat from a food perspective, because food may not be supplied on short haul flights. Now, turbulence is normal, so don't feel concerned by it. It's just a normal part of flying, and there's no danger to you or the plane. You'll likely be supplied with a landing card, as mentioned earlier on the flight. So I'd advise you fill it in on the plane, just to save time going through customs at the other end. You're going to be tired and excited to get through to the gate, ready to get on your coach to head to the Jamboree site, or on the other one, the other flights, other locations you may be heading to. You've got plenty of time on board, so just do it on the plane, and it's a lot easier. And just do as your cabin crew advise generally when they ask you to do things, or and make sure you just advise the time that you're landing. If you have got a connecting flight, then it's sometimes worthwhile just notifying the cabin crew that's the case. It's very easy to leave your passport in the front pocket, and it's not as simple as just getting back on the aircraft if you do so. So my top advice is just don't put your passport anywhere near that front pocket unless you're 100% sure that you're definitely going to take it out afterwards, because it's so easy to do. When I went to Jamboree as a young person, I definitely had a young person in my unit that did it, and it did involve an extra hour of us waiting at an airport in Germany. Now, if you're on an international connecting flight, just follow the signs. It's likely that if you have a domestic transfer, you may need to even change terminals. So make sure that you just get on that action straight away. Now, where you'll just have to follow the same details again, security, etc. Now, follow signs to the arrivals or bag collection, and you'll need to go through border security first. So have your boarding passport and your passport and your landing cards handy straight away. Now, you'll then need to get your bag from the carousel and head straight through customs with your bag. So you've got through to arrivals. Congratulations. Now, where are you heading? If you're traveling on your own, have you booked fares to get to a pickup point? Are you planning on staying somewhere from that point? Make sure that you're planning ahead at that particular stage. That concludes my my recommendations, and I'll pass on to travel places.
Okay, guys. So thank you to Chris. So what happens when things don't go to plan? As we've got there, contact the UK contingent emergency number, and the number will be on the app. Hopefully you've downloaded the app. That obviously is where you've got your flight details, and the contact numbers will be in there if they're not already, but I would suspect they're not there already, so you don't ring. Obviously contact on the event is via the app and via those numbers, and beforehand via email and the various the other methods that we've shared already. So as we go through, lost or damaged baggage, you need to report that to the airline's desk before you go through customs. You can't, it is very difficult, if at all possible, to go back through, because once the baggage is lost or mislaid airside, and obviously once you're no longer airside, you can't easily access any lost baggage and that kind of thing. So get yourself to the airline's desk that obviously the airline you flew with. And as Chris said earlier, there'll be lots of people who'll be quite happy to help and direct you. And then you need a reference number. So once you have that reference number, keep that and any other documentation they give you, and keep that safe. And then obviously you would then report that on to the UK contingent, and we'll be working with travel places and all the other travel partners involved to then obviously make sure your bag meets up with you, or you know how to get hold of your bag. So we'll be working with you on that. So who can I contact about travel? And as I mentioned earlier about the various email addresses that we have, we've got the form on the IST zone. And if you see there, IST zone help, there's a drop-down list. And then I need help from obviously the IST crew, about the website, help with travel. Select that one, drop in your question or your concern or whatever it might be, and one of the guys will get back to you, certainly in good time, but just beware, obviously volunteers are involved and things don't always move instantly in our busy world. But certainly we will get back to you, and somebody will see that question and make sure it gets the appropriate priority and is dealt with in good time. Okay, so only contact travel places if your query relates to the additional tours. And that's primarily because obviously you're travelling as part of the contingent, and as part of that contingent, Andy Lewis, Matt and all the others on the contingent support team are there to help manage and answer your questions. If it's outside of that, as I say, with the additional tours, travel places are the guys to go to. And then in the background, they're helping us with all the contingent stuff. So come to us first. 9 times out of 10, we'll have the answer straight away. There'll be the odd few we have to research and look up, and then obviously we'll go from there. Right, John, are you with us now? Maybe not. Okay, moving on. Yeah, so on the question front, we've got John Carroll, and I think Matt's going to field some of the questions for us.
Yes, Mark. So we'll get going with some of the questions that people have been getting in. We had some that were sent in beforehand as well. So we'll go through those as we go along. Chris, so the first one is for you, if you get yourself ready. The first one we've got for Chris is someone has asked about what is the packing cube?
The question about packing cubes, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I just saw that question come through. So packing cubes are effectively like little mini bags that you can pack items into. So I've got about 6 of them. One of them I pack all my pants in, one of them I pack all my socks in, one of them I pack all my shirts in, one I pack all my shorts in. I go through all the items that I'm going to need. So rather than having like all of your items in one bag, you effectively pack like 6 bags into a bag, or 7 bags, depending on how many packing cubes you have. They're really cheap on Amazon. If you go on Amazon, you can buy like for a tenner, like 3 or 4. And they're just so useful for packing. So if you need to get that key item out of your bag, rather than having to dig through everything and ruin all that perfect packing you did, particularly if you may be overweight and you need to move something in your hand luggage, whatever it may be, they're absolutely life-changing when it comes to packing, and I really would advise anybody to do them. It's made packing life so much easier, and also unpacking as well.
Excellent, Chris. Thank you. And here's one for you, Andy, if you get yourself ready. We've got a question being asked about will people be fed on their flights?
Right. Well, I'm going to bounce that to the expert. John Carroll's online from Travel Places. He can tell you all about that. John?
Yeah, all of you will be fed as per the very relevant airline policies regarding meals. So on all transatlantic flights, you will get their standard economy meal service. As I've put on the website already. If you have any dietary requests, please make sure they're in events there. Otherwise, there's no guarantee we'll fulfill those.
Excellent, John. Thank you. And I've got another one for you as well before you go away. Where will the post events depart from in Washington?
The post events, there will be coaches from the accommodation, from the university accommodation to the airport at the start of to get their flight onto the additional tours.
Excellent, John. Thank you. I've got one for you, Andy, here. So we've had a few people message in. They're all on option A, but they're obviously landing into different airports in the USA. For example, some are into Washington, some are into other airports. How are they all being getting to site?
Well, as I did say earlier, there will be coaches at all of those airports that are already scheduled, and there will be in the arrivals area, there will be representatives of either travel places, the CST or TMS. They're waiting for them when they come through airside, which is, again, it's important that they're all in uniform because they'll be easy to spot. And the coaches are all scheduled there. You'll be ushered onto your coach with your luggage and shipped straight out towards the summit.
Excellent, Andy, thank you. I've got a question on rules on power bank. I don't know who wants to take this one, but how do airlines stand on the power banks traveling?
I'm going to pass that one back to John, but I think the answer will be you need to check on the airline's website about what their specific policy is. But John, unless you want to give any more advice than that.
I would go with you, Andy. Check on the website with the airline because all have a different rule regarding that.
And it does change from time to time, so that you just need to check not just on power banks, but on all of their policy about what you can put in your carry-on bag and what you're allowed to pack in your main luggage in the hold.
Excellent, thank you. There's a question here. How long is the journey from Washington Dulles Airport to the Jamboree site?
Approximately 6 hours by coach once you're on the coach and going.
Awesome, thank you. There's one for you, Andy, here. So there's someone who's traveling on option A and B. They've now decided that they don't want to get their return flight back to the UK. What's the policy on that?
As far as we're concerned, it's a bit black and white. Your flight is booked and you need to catch that flight. If you've got a very specific issue, I suggest you send an email into the travel email and we'll deal with it. But at the moment, the black and white answer is you're booked on that flight and you'll be expected to be on it.
Awesome, thank you. Probably one for travel places here. We've got a question. What is in terms of if they've got connecting flights, what happens to their baggage from one flight to the next?
All tickets will have checked baggage through from the start of their journey until the end, if they're on the same airline, which I believe everybody is. So you'll check your bags in let's say, Manchester. You won't see them in Heathrow. You'll see them when you arrive in Washington.
Excellent, thank you. Question, Andy, on how can people find out what medication they can take into the United States?
Good question. I'm not absolutely sure. I'll look it up, but I think there is something on the website for UK passport control and customs. I'll take that one and come back to you with an answer on that, which we'll publish.
Excellent, Andy, thank you. We just had not a question but a comment from some lovely IST member who's currently working at Heathrow Airport. There's some work being done at London Heathrow at the minute, so this just reinforces Chris's point about people needing to make sure that they have enough time at the airport. So just a quick one about that. We've also had a few in about people who are on the IST high routes, that they're a bit concerned because obviously they will start work on the 18th. I've spoken to the IST team and they have informed the high ropes team at the Jamboree of what time you will be arriving, so everyone is aware of the times that people will be arriving, so you don't need to worry about those. We've had a couple of questions about uniform in terms of what makes. We've had a few people asking, do we need to wear things like walking boots and things like that? So what we'll do is we'll take that one away and just check the answer on that one. It'll be a good idea maybe to think about luggage as well. If you are a bit close to your luggage allowance, it might be worth wearing your walking boots so that you don't pack them and it forms part of your luggage. There's a question here, Andy, as well about we've all been given internal flight references, but when will we actually get our booking reference or the e-ticket numbers for our flights? So that John might want to chip in there as well.
Well, we discussed this one last night, and those references will be given out around June when the tickets themselves are ready to be issued. There's no need for those to be issued any earlier than that. John, anything to add to that?
No, completely agree.
Awesome, thank you very much for that one. We've had something about vaccinations as well, so I think we have some guidance on vaccinations on the website, and if not, we'll have a look at that and we'll see. But always check the recent Foreign and Commonwealth Office website as well about any vaccinations that may be suggested on their website. They've got full travel advice for any countries in North America who you should maybe think about visiting. I'm just looking through the questions now, and I think we've pretty much answered them. So if you have a question, it might be a good idea to get that in now, to make sure that, well, we've had a few about insurance as well. The insurance policy is on the UK contingent website. There was a link in the February IST Times. So if you dig out the February edition of the IST Times, you can have a look there for the link to the insurance policy and everything. So you can make sure that you fully read it so you understand everything about it. We've covered the one about airline losing their bag. We've got a question about, so will there be non-scouts on the plane, or are they the planes completely full of people traveling with the contingent? Who would like to have that one?
I can reply to that one. Unfortunately, there will be general public as well, so it is not just the scouts on the plane.
Excellent. So I think that links in with what Andy said earlier about making sure that we're setting the right impression for scouting. We've had a few questions as well about the entry and exit points. Andy did mention them earlier, so please do refer back to the UK contingent website for the ideas about the official entry points and exit points. And I think that we're getting towards the end, so unless anyone has got any urgent questions coming in, it might be a good idea to get those in now. I'll give people another minute. So we've got a question here about what time will people leave site, Andy, to go to Washington for the post event?
That's something that's still to be scheduled. We will be putting out a schedule of coach times. Obviously, we're sorting out the schedule of coach times for all the units at this point in time. We'll be able to advise you the departure times for the IST in the very near future.
Awesome. So just keep an eye out, folks, for those ones. There's a question about are people able to reserve any seats for the flights that they have booked if they're traveling on option A and B?
I'll answer that one. It all depends on the airline. Some of the airlines you're flying on do allow online check-in for group bookings, others don't. So it'll be a case of if you try out 24 hours beforehand and it lets you, then you can try and pre-seat it. Others will say no online booking allowed, so you have to do it when you get to the airport.
Just a reminder as well, I think, about if anyone has any particular needs or anything, as John mentioned earlier, make sure everything is logged on events there. so that we can pick it up our end to make sure that any requests are treated in the entirety. We've had a question come in, Andy, if you just want to reiterate. So travelling in the High Ropes IST team, all the information they've received so far suggests the Jamboree registration centre won't be open to accept them. Can you just give us an update on that, please?
I've been assured from the heads of contingent meeting, which took place last weekend, that that's not the case, that reception centre will be open to greet the teams that are going in slightly earlier. And from then on, it will be open 24/7 for those that are arriving at silly o'clock in the morning.
Excellent. I've got a question for Chris here. Chris, if you get yourself ready. How many changes of clothes would you recommend to pack and take to the Jamboree?
I mean, me personally, I think I can get 3 weeks of packing in packing cubes, so I don't need to do washing. But that's just my personal preference. I know that I'd need less washing stuff, for showering, etc. So I think you can quite easily get away with enough t-shirts and enough shorts, etc. for the whole period of time. If you think about the city days, you could probably, and the traveling days, you can probably get away with extended use of some of those, and it shouldn't be much of a problem at all. So my personal recommendation is, if you don't think you're going to do washing, then pack it all. The bag's certainly big enough to do so, but there's plenty of opportunities, and at every Jamboree I've seen, there are people that do washing. So think about that as well, if you've got the motivation to do so.
Excellent, Chris. Thank you. I think that brings us an end to questions. I'll just have a quick breeze through now, just in case we haven't covered any. I think we've covered any that we necessarily haven't covered. We've got a list here, and we'll take them offline and publish some FAQs. We'll use some of the questions for FAQs, and we'll make sure that those get on the website and make sure that you folk get notified it. So I think that's up from me, and back over to Mark for our closing statement.
Thank you, Matthew, and team, obviously, for answering those questions. So as Matt just said there, we've captured the questions you've asked this evening. We've got those, and if we've not already answered those for you, we'll be getting back to you directly. But do look at the FAQs on the UK contingent site. Do email in if you've got a travel question, as one of the slides there. General Jamboree travel questions, send those into travel@UK contingent, or complete the form on with the drop down that I showed you on the slide there, and that will come into the travel team as appropriate. And similarly, if your question is IST or just general help, the options are there to drop us a line. If your question relates to a post Jamboree tour question, go straight to travel places. That's not a problem. We just don't want to inundate these people with my bus from the airport, what time, and all that kind of thing. And it's good to hear, Andy, that the welcome centre will be open 24 hours a day. I think that was a big concern for a number of the IST out there. So as it says there, our next IST telecon will be on the 15th of May, when we're talking a bit more about the post event. And that's the big show, big show, and so on. Your chance to experience Washington and all that kind of thing. So until then, as they say on all the good programs, that's all, folks.